when I transferred to a different hospital, the surgeon said that it was about the size of a watermelon compressed against my left lung. And when they said that, I'm like, how does that even fit in my body? How does a watermelon-sized tumor fit in my body? And secondly, how does it grow from nothing to 20 centimeters wide in 5 months? Then makes me realize, oh, this is a really aggressive cancer. Who am I? All right, so my name is Julie Kramer. I'm 34 years old right now. I'll be 35 tomorrow. And I live in Collingswood, New Jersey with my son, who is 3, and my 3-legged dog. And on my free time, I love being adventurous. I love traveling. I love being around the warm weather. I obviously love being heavily involved in advocating for the cancer community, most specifically synovial sarcoma. And I do dabble in a little bit of yoga. I'm yoga certified, and I'm actually a Reiki practitioner certified. And I do that more closely for, myself or close family members, things like that. So I do like to involve myself in the wellness industry, and that kind of picked up after everything happened with cancer. Just being a little bit more mindful of what I put in my body, the energy that surrounds me, who I choose to be in my life, things like that. And yeah.
That's great. I didn't know you did Reiki. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I know.
I don't do
I
Reiki, but
do
I
it.
go to Reiki.
It's like so every now and then. It's like a once in a blue moon, but I'm level 2 certified in that. And then I'm a Ayurvedic um yoga certified with like a focus on like yin practice, just like a softer movement, more like meditation, um, which I just like. I feel like after cancer, I really dove deep into my spirituality, which is crazy because of just like where I come from, how I was raised, who I was before. And I still am the same person I was before cancer. I still honor that girl. Like she is still me. But I discovered this new Julie, I'm just still discovering her every day. And this new Julie is softer and very empathetic and compassionate, and emotionally deep. And it's something still, it feels new, but it feels like my most true self, which is also exciting. So I feel like cancer kind of forced me to be in such a vulnerable position in life, where I then realized my calling is to just express this vulnerability to this, wide community, whoever's willing to listen, and let these people know it is okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to feel what you're feeling without guilt, without shame, and just really allowing self to be just like unapologetically in existence, and just being very comfortable with, the feelings that come with life, even if they're uncomfortable, like, just being grateful for the pain and being grateful for the joy, like everything, because it's just a blessing to feel it all.
So cancer. When did you find out? What kind of cancer? What's the beginning to this
So
story?
the so the beginning actually started 5 months prior to my diagnosis. I was in a pretty bad car accident in October of 2015. And for some reason, I was chosen by the universe to stay alive, and I was able to walk away from that car accident. And the only injuries I really sustained was trauma to the chest from the seatbelt. Go figure. So I had bruising all over my chest from the seatbelt, a bruising on my neck, and I opted out of going to the hospital right from the accident. But the following day, obviously, if you've been in a car accident, you feels like you got hit by a truck directly. So I did go and get x-rays done the day after, and just to make sure nothing was broken and everything was clear. Everything looked fine, all good in the chest area. However, since the accident, with the, injuries I sustained, I experienced a lot of back pain, which I just, I brushed to the side because I'm a tall individual, was athletic my entire life, played softball, and I always struggled with back pain. So I didn't think anything of it because it wasn't really new. It was just worse. And I figured maybe there's a disc misalignment, something like that from the accident. So I started to see a chiropractor. So a friend of a friend referred me to this chiropractor, and up, for the next 5 months, this is who I'm seeing. This is who I'm going to for treatment a few times a week. And I noticed that it wasn't really getting better. If anything, it was getting worse. And they tried, different ways to treat. They tried this laser treatment, anything that they were trying to really think outside the box. And me, I'm like, oh, nothing's really working, but I still didn't think anything of it. I didn't think of going to see a specialist. Nothing was considered in that sense because, again, I just figured back pain. It's normal. I have it all the time. It's nothing new. So fast forward to March of 2014, I run the Phillies 5K in Philadelphia. And that night I'm going to get ready for bed and I go to lay down and I can't breathe at all laying down. And I I do some trial and I lean forward and I'm like, okay, I can breathe when I lean forward. I can't breathe when I lean back. And it just felt like there was just like a 20-pound weight on my chest leaning back. At the
When
time,
you, like, laid back and you say you can't breathe, do you mean, like, it was, like, just, like, hard? Or do you actually could not feel your chest rise and fall?
I could not feel there was no lung capacity at all laying back. Like I couldn't, like there was nothing there, but everything was really open when I would lean forward. I still had no idea. I wasn't concerned at this point. I honestly feel like I wasn't concerned for a very long time. And I think that is reflective of just how naive I am in the medical, industry at the time. So my parents are divorced and I lived with my dad, but my mom is just, she's my mom. So she's like the go-getter. So I reach out to her and she's like, let's take you to the hospital. Let's get it checked out. So we go to the ER at the local hospital by my house and they do an x-ray in the ER. And, the nurse comes in and she shares that there's a large mass in my chest. And I didn't know what that meant. I'm like, a mass. Okay. Like, is like cloudy? Like, is it like what kind of pills can you give me? Just give me something so I can, get out of here. And so they're like, they didn't mention really anything more than that. And they choose to admit me. And I'm like, okay, what's all right. And so like my mom's just waiting there with me. And then just it all kind of happens really fast after that. More scans were taken. I'm in a room at this point. I spent a total of 1 month in this hospital, pretty much, running tests. And I remember after a biopsy, I think my first biopsy, the on-call doctor comes in. It's a gentleman that I've never seen before, steps into my room and I'm just he's standing bedside. My parents are on each side of me because we're obviously like anxious for results. And he comes in and he's like, hi, so we're not entirely sure what cancer this could be. It's looking closely like lymphoma, teratoma, thymoma, or sarcoma. We're going to need to run, more tests, maybe go deeper on the biopsy and gather more tissue. And like, he just like is talking after he's mentions these 4 cancers, like what? And it's the first time I heard the C word and didn't hear much of what he had to say after that. It truly did. Like I just blacked out and cancer was not on my mind. Like none of that was on my mind. I just thought there's something in here. I could take a pill and it will go away. And then I go on with my life. And
How
so,
old were you at this point?
at this, I was 23. So I was diagnosed, um, 10 days after my birthday, my 23rd birthday.
Oh, wow. So
So,
you were
yeah,
like
so
a
I did
new
like a fun
23-year-old.
yeah. So I did like a fun 23-year-old celebration with, my friends and it's funny because I had no idea that there's a giant tumor in my chest. I'm just going about my life looking good, feeling relatively good for the most part, and like so it was a huge surprise hearing him drop the C word, especially like that. So, we ask him to leave and we now need more answers. So I think we end up speaking to a thoracic surgeon in there at this hospital. And I think they ran another test and he comes into my room and this is, within a few days, there's just so much happening, but then a lot of wait time in between. We ended up speaking to the thoracic surgeon at this local hospital and he comes in and he's very transparent, which I will always appreciate. and just says, we don't know what you have. Think it could be sarcoma, but we're not able to treat you, and it's looking like you have around 3 months to live. So, and I actually don't even remember hearing that part, because at this point I was on so many pain medications where I was already like not functioning. Like the pain was getting significantly worse. Like, it was almost like everything just like once I got to the hospital, it all happened really fast. The pain got worse, everything got more serious.
And when you have like you're saying a mass like in your chest. So for people to like visualize, what do you mean? Is it like where was it on you? Because I think it was also it's quite large too, right?
Right. So this tumor was 20 centimeters wide. And when I transferred to a different hospital, which I'll cover shortly, the surgeon said that it was about the size of a watermelon compressed against my left lung. And when they said that, I'm like, I'm like, how does that even fit in my body? How does a watermelon sized tumor fit in my body? And secondly, how does it grow from nothing to 20 centimeters wide in 5 months? Then makes me realize, oh, this is a really aggressive cancer. That I do know, because I don't know much, but for something to grow from nothing to 20 centimeters wide, the size of a watermelon, I mean, that thing's growing exponentially each day. And that was scary to think about, like what was happening in my body so quickly without me knowing. And so this doctor shares that they can't treat me, and right from there my parents get to work. They're like, we need to go somewhere else. We and the community then, really came together. My mom had really supportive friends who had known, what direction to guide us in. So a really good friend of my mom said, there's a really great doctor at Penn, or a thoracic surgeon. Penn is a wonderful facility. Let's get Julie in there. And of course, there's a lot of, paperwork that needs to be signed off when you're transferring. You got to transfer the pathology reports. So there was a lot of like messiness that, my parents handled, and they handled it very well. And my mom was able to get the physical pathology report from the first hospital and drive it over the bridge herself and deliver it to where I was treated, which was Penn Medicine in Philadelphia. And I first met with and now this is probably around like the beginning of April, I would say. And I have, at this point, 4 doctor's appointments in one day. So the first appointment, I meet with a thoracic surgeon at Penn, who then refers me to a different thoracic surgeon at Penn that covers this type of cancer. And so I meet with that thoracic surgeon, who was Dr. Single, who eventually did my surgery. However, meeting with him, he was like, this tumor is way too large to operate on. I can't do this. So we need to shrink it first. So he then sends me to Dr. Staden, who has since retired. And, my nurse practitioner, Leticia Simmerol, is still there. And it's great. It's great having a familiar face there, because she's like my OG girl. So it's great that she's still under my care. So they gave me the primary chemo cocktail to treat synovial sarcoma, which is typically adriamycin, ifosfamide, and mesna. There was so much back and forth with finding what route to take. What's the smartest way to go about this? And I will say, as quickly as like everything happened fairly quickly for me, it felt like, and I owe a lot of that to my mom. She made a lot of things happen. I did not have health insurance upon diagnosis, so there was a lot of denials, a lot of like, things not getting approved the first, even second time. So there was a little bit of delay there, but not too much. And I ended up receiving my first chemo treatment mid-April. So the whole process was about a month, maybe less than a month. And I would say that is very quick. And I appreciate the doctors moving fast. And it's also scary to think about, like, they were moving so fast because my odds were so low. After I met with these 2 thoracic surgeons, and then I meet with this oncologist, they then send me right over to meet with a, fertility doctor. And they're thinking, hey, let's see if we can, preserve your eggs. And, they're like, the whole process takes 3 weeks. And I'm like, I don't have 3 weeks. Almost a month ago, I had 3 months. So now I probably have 2 months, which would lead me to 1 month. And then I'm dead, if that's my way of thinking. So I had to forego that option and I needed to focus on just staying alive. So we began treatment.
And so, okay, what was treatment like? Because I've heard so many stories about how awful treatment is, and it's like it's nothing like what people actually think it is. It's like it's so much worse, when people say like, "Well, I went through chemo." It's like, "No, no, no, like, they went through chemo. It's a whole ball game."
It is a whole ball game, and that's they give you the new patient pamphlet and to read, what side effects you can experience. And obviously everyone's like, oh, hair loss, like that's gonna suck. And, I remember posting on Facebook, I actually wanted to keep everything private. I didn't want to share that I was sick because I didn't want people to feel bad for me. But then I realized how serious of a diagnosis I was dealing with. I'm not gonna be able to hide it. I'm a very social person, and I wanted to go out and about and still do things. And I'm like, if I'm walking around bald, like people are gonna be like, what's up? You good? Like there was no running from it, and it was becoming more of a reality. So I did share with, the Facebook community, and everyone was so supportive. And I joked, I was like, looking for some, wig options, girls, like come on. So trying to like make light of a very severe situation. But it is interesting because now that I have experienced treatment the way I did, and I'm heavily involved in the community and I experience how others experience treatment, it is so different. And it's incredible how one or a few chemo drugs, the same regimen that someone could be on, can be so severe. And then someone else taking it, can have much more minimal side effects. And it's interesting because every body and every, diagnosis and case is really so different. And it helped to remind myself that my body is responding so severely because it's working really well. That's what I told myself. And that did help. So, I started chemo, and the regimen was Monday through Thursday, about 8 hours a day. I did outpatient to start. And then I would go back on Friday, get the Neulasta shot. At the time, there wasn't a patch. And then on the weekends, I would have my Mesna fluids at the house. I would have an at-home nurse come visit and take care of me. And then 2 weeks off. And that was one whole cycle. And I did 6 total of those. And I finished chemo in August, and at the halfway point, my side effects were so bad where I just went on a complete physical and mental decline and just opted into inpatient chemo. Excuse me, because I was getting so sick of having to always go back to the hospital. Like in the beginning, I felt hopeful. I had my first chemo treatment. I still had hair, and it was almost like, I got this. Like, cancer's great. And then, my hair's falling out in school. I was at school at the time, and my hair's falling out in class, and I'm like, all right, I just got to cut my hair. And I had to have some fun with my hair. We shaved it into a mohawk, and I'm like, this is cool. And then the side effects started to kick in more, and the fatigue was really hitting hard. The hair had to get fully shaved off. The eyebrows were falling off. The eyelashes were falling off. It was looking more like how bad I was feeling.
Did it
And
feel a
I
little bit like you were almost did it feel like you were almost, like, falling apart a little bit? That's what it
absolutely,
sounds like.
it's like think of yourself as a puzzle, and then these puzzle pieces are just like popping out. And it's like the puzzle piece of my eyes, like, and then you're completely losing your identity when you're going through this. And even if there are no physical side effects at all, chemo is so hard on the body to experience. And just in addition, it's like, I can't fake feeling okay because look at me. Like, I looked like a thumb, I looked so sick. I had a rash all over my chest, and, I just losing the eyelashes and the eyebrows, and my fingernails were falling off. And that's like something that I didn't even know about. And at the time, 10, 11, 12 years ago on social media, we don't have what we have now. And I'm so appreciative of the community and what has been built and the resources available to patients now. But at the time, I didn't really have that. And, I'm trying to Google, and all I'm reading are like, clinical trials of all of the patients that are dead from what I had. So like, there wasn't a lot of resources available to me as there are now. And I'm grateful that the community has that because it is very important. But it was just, watching your body and feeling your body just deteriorate. It takes a toll over time, especially on your mental health. And it certainly did. I got scanned halfway through treatment to just see how things were going. And it was working, and that was really hopeful. I had a great meeting with my oncologist, and I remember asking him. I was like, just curious, because in my head, just based on my research, I was a Googler. I researched everything night and day, like 4 in the morning. I remember researching everything about synovial sarcoma. And based on my research, I was like, okay, maybe I'm like stage 2 or 3. And I never asked. I never asked. I never knew. I never knew what my official diagnosis was. And I was just like curious halfway through chemo. I'm like, all right, like I can handle it. I'm like, what do I have? Like stage 2, stage 3. And I can tell how he was wording it. He didn't want to even focus on that, maybe because of his experience as an oncologist. And he can see, how people respond to hearing stage 4. But he told me anyway, because I asked, and I appreciate his honesty. And he was like, he tried to make it sound a little like not like a death sentence, because I think he wanted to keep my hope alive. He saw that I had spirit. And he's right, because honestly, it did break my spirit a little bit hearing that it was stage 4. I don't regret asking. I'm glad I know, because, in a sense, it did give me motivation in the end. But initially hearing that, I saw him in his appointment. And then right after that, I went to chemo. And that chemo session was my last outpatient chemo session. I think I tapped out after that. I threw up that whole session. It was like one of the sickest I've been. And I think a lot of that was just mental and nerves, and just hearing that it was stage 4, because I didn't think that in my head. I was very naive with my understanding of cancer, but I knew stage 4 was bad. I knew it was the worst. And I knew, based on my research, no one survived stage 4 synovial sarcoma. And I didn't want to be, thinking that I'm any different. I'm like, so I still fought, right? But I opted into doing the remaining chemotherapy inpatient.
And how long is all this? So you went, it was like April, you went inpatient.
Mhm.
And so then after that, so you were how many months inpatient? And then
So April, May, and June, I was in outpatient. And then probably end of June, July, and August were inpatient. I stayed in the hospital, and that's also when my body just got most sick. I think the worst month I ever had was July. And I remember being in the hospital July 4th. And I remember just like on an absurd amount of pain medication that I ended up getting dependent on. And I felt so sick. They had to delay chemo because my counts were so low. And I ended up having to get 2 blood transfusions and 2 platelet transfusions in one day. And I remember looking at my little dry erase board, from my hospital bed, and it just says like, Happy 4th of July. And I'm like looking at it like, all of my friends are like down the shore. It was really hitting hard around that time. And I'm like, all my friends are like hanging out by the bay at the shore. They're swimming, they're on floats, they're on boats. And I'm here with 104-degree fever, with no hair, and feeling my absolute worst self, mentally, physically, emotionally, everything. It was like, it felt like, what am I fighting for? And it started to get really dark. And there was a really dark moment I had when I was home. And it was one of the days that were supposed to be a good day. I had really bad thrush as a side effect, like really horrible mouth sores, to where I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink, I couldn't take my medication. And I was just like a vegetable. And, my mom is trying to like encourage me, and she's trying to keep her spark and hope alive. And, she's like, you just have to swallow this one. And I turn over at her, and I was like, I don't want to live anymore. And I always remember this moment. And I think this was such an impactful moment in my journey, because it's very honest. And that's why I think, like, that's why I speak on vulnerability the way I do, because I think it's okay for me to say that, right? Like, I don't want my life to end. I just wanted the pain to end. I wanted the pain to go away. It was such an unreal and overwhelming amount of pain, physically, emotionally, mentally. Like, just, it was intolerable in that moment. And I said what I said, and I know that's like the worst thing you can ever say to your mother. And I know it hurt her to hear, but I know my mom is strong, and she remained strong for me in that moment. And, I go to the bathroom, And I just kind of like look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, this can't be all. This can't be it. You know, there's more fight. I can't give up. I'm not someone that gives up, and not that it's giving up. It's just I have to just keep going. I will go until I can't go anymore. And
When you
that's not
said
really.
that when you said that to yourself, I'm curious, do you feel like that was the pain speaking, or did you actually feel like in that moment you were just done?
I think in that moment, for a very brief moment, the hope was gone. And I remember what it felt like to not have hope. And it felt really scary. I didn't trust myself to fight any harder if my hope was gone. And I think that, throughout this whole experience journey, hope is the most important thing to have. With that, we can push a little further. Um, and it's interesting, and I feel like that moment of losing hope has completely shaped my life now, which is why I feel like I'm able to be, vulnerable and more compassionate and more empathetic, because I know what it's like to not have hope at all, which has made me understand the importance of it, and especially in something like a cancer diagnosis. And so that I think that moment really shaped, my whole journey, where I was like, okay, we're gonna, just, it was like a brush it off, feel this moment and keep going. You're not allowed to give up. And I think allowing myself to lose the hope for a minute, like that, it was only like a second or like a minute that I felt that way. It wasn't long. I didn't sit with it too long. But the fact that like my body experienced that was able to like kind of rejuvenate me and push me forward. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. We know what it feels like to lose this hope. So we can't feel this again. Like, you got to find some hope, girl. Like, it was like that. So it was a really impactful moment. And, with the side effects that I experienced, I mean, chemo was the most brutal for me in every way possible.
So you went through this inpatient treatment and you made it out. So what was like the end of that period like? Like what was finally where it was, gone, I guess for what other people would say, or we call it like disease free.
Yeah. So when I finished chemo in August, we waited about a month to kind of like rid the chemo from the body. And then at that point, my body was strong enough and I gained a little bit more weight enough to get surgery. And they did perform the surgery. It's like a thoracotomy, where they just crack your sternum open and go in there, and they cut from the neck right here all the way around under the breastbone, and went in there and, took out the whole tumor, took out a pretty decent chunk of my left lung. In my surgeon's terms, he shared that the tumor obliterated my phrenic nerve and subclavian vein, so I did not have those anymore. And they had to remove ribs 1 and 2 because the cancer just like took over the bones. So it was all over the place. It was a mess in there. It's still incredible to even believe. I mean, how I'm here, even able to share it with you. It's just it's crazy every time I share it. But I'm very grateful he got clear margins, and, he's an incredible surgeon, and I'm very grateful, Dr. Single. He's like, I hope I never see you again. I'm like, no, he was like, for good reason. He is great and I love him. So, I healed from surgery, and then we did preventative proton radiation, but I did the full 36 rounds. And at the time, proton radiation was very new. And I was like one of the first patients to receive it at Penn. So the machines are new. And if anyone is familiar with getting proton therapy, it's like a 3-story high machine, each one of them. There were some kinks they had to work out. So I was there every day for maybe like 8 hours. And they had to fix the machine. I had to go off. So and I'm 23 years old. My radiation techs are probably my age, maybe 25. And I had, it was always 2 girls and 2 boys. And, again, I'm 23 with a conveniently located tumor on my chest. So I'm like hands up like this, naked on a table for hours. And, I'm just talking to them. They're like, yeah, we're going to go to a rave this weekend. I'm like, cool, nice. It's just cancer really humbles you. All of these experiences, shape, the way you look at life later. But so we finish, proton radiation, and it took a whole 365 days for me to meet with my oncologist again and for him to share that I am NED, no evidence of disease. And it felt incredible to hear that because I was like, yes, I'm done. It's over with. I can go back to my life just like everyone was telling me I could do. Right. And I'm like, this is so cool. I'll go back to being like a young 20 whatever year old and thinking that like everything's fine and dandy and just getting monitored every 3 months. So we go for, I have my first 3-month checkup and we go and get the scans and there's suspicion on my left lung. And my surgeon was not entirely sure it was cancer, but he said, just to be safe, let's go ahead and remove it. We'll test it when we're done. And I'm like, all right, like we should be fine. Like if it was cancer, they would know it was cancer maybe. And I remember being in post-op and I like opened my eyes. My mouth is dry from the anesthesia. And I was like, someone's swabbing my mouth. And I'm like, yeah. And I like open my eyes and it's just my surgeon there. And I'm so happy to see him. And he's like, so we did test it and it ended up, and it was synovial sarcoma. It was a recurrence. And I broke down. I broke down harder than I broke down when I first heard the initial diagnosis because it made it real. I was so naive in the beginning, which I think helped me in some ways, but hearing that I had a recurrence, I knew that I needed to reshape my mind to understand that this is something that I'm going to have to live with probably for the rest of my life. I realized that I won't ever truly be in the clear. This will always haunt me. And how do I move forward knowing that this will haunt me? Because I can't let it control my whole life. And I'll be completely honest, it did for the first few years.
Did you have like a moment after you had a recurrence where you're like, "Oh, it's not just like gone, like this can actually come back?" Because I can imagine like being a patient, getting diagnosed with cancer, and then you have a recurrence and it's just like, oh, I was just expecting to get through the first one. I didn't know I was gonna have to go through a second one.
Yeah. And that's exactly what it was. I did so much and we even did the preventative measures, with proton radiation. And I was like, oh, this is good. Like I got it. Because I always thought, I mean, I was so, everyone thinks that like I can't get cancer until it happens to them. I'm like, I'm not someone to get cancer. Like, what does that even mean? Who is someone that can, and so it was just, hearing it again, it was exactly like that. I knew that my life will never go back to normal. So I had to unlearn a lot of the things that as someone with cancer, you hear within the cancer community. People like to call them cancer muggles. I'm not really crazy about that term because I think people genuinely are trying to help and they think they're saying the right thing by saying, you're gonna get better and you can put this past you. They just try to say something encouraging in that moment. And I think us going through it, we believe it. We're like, yeah, maybe I can go back to normal. Because it's scary to hear when you're going through treatment, you're never going to go back to normal. Like you don't really want to hear that. You need something positive. So it was very real. And I knew that that's when the cloud formed, I would say. My first recurrence was when the cloud formed over my head that I knew was going to be following me forever. The healing went fine though. They were able to remove that nodule that was in my lung. And then I was like, okay, maybe I'm done now. Maybe it's 2 times the charm and we're good. So I was slowly getting back into my life after that. I was out of school, out of work. So I started to like slowly get back into the rhythm of things. And after a year, I enrolled back in school, completely changed my major. When I was diagnosed, I was going and taking my prereqs for dental hygiene. So like extensive science classes. And I completely changed my major to communications, switched colleges to one that was just local to me, completely just like shifted, the future route I want to go and that I want to take. And I was so excited. I was like, I got this. Like, let's do school again. So I enroll and it's about a week before classes start in August. I go for, and this is fast forward. This is like almost 2 years after my recurrence and like maybe like a year and a half around there. I go for, my scans and they've been so great every 3 months. I'm like, I've been doing wonderful. And so right before I start school, I meet with them and there are 2 new nodules that show up. one in the left lung and one in the right lung. So it spread to the other side. And there was a lot of back and forth because, and with the treatment and the post treatment changes that can happen from radiation and surgery and the scar tissue, they weren't entirely sure. So they had to have another, set of eyes. So they refer me to a different radiation oncologist who does the SBRT therapy. So, he takes a look at it and he's like, yeah, this is definitely a recurrence. And, we can treat this one with the SBRT radiation, but this one we can remove. So the one that they treated with the radiation, that high dose radiation at Penn, it's called CyberKnife. That was the area that was on the left side. So there was a lot of already scar tissue from both proton radiation and just like the surgery. So they couldn't go in there and remove that just because the tissue was it was too much, but they were able to surgically remove the one on the right side. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, it wasn't the third recurrence didn't hit as bad as the second because I had already like kind of mentally prepared that this is something that's going to be going on for the rest of my life. So when it came back, I just thought, okay, this is probably going to always come back in some way. And I just have to trust that there are enough options for me at the time to treat it. And I'm just going to do that forever until I die from this. That was my mindset, which I honestly think is a healthy mindset to have. It's what works for me because it was already taking up so much space in my life mentally. And it was already kind of holding me back from a lot, and I couldn't let it hold me back in more ways than it already was. So we went through with the radiation, we went through with the surgery. So I was able to do the surgery and take some of the classes online. So like I'm like in class. I was finally able to physically go back in class, and I'm taking, I'm going from radiation to class to work to and it was interesting. I'm very proud of myself. I graduated cum laude, and I was like, you know what? But it was more of like Julie, you need to like push yourself. And I have like this very, I guess, unhealthy like standard now for myself because I'm like, you beat stage 4 cancer. You better do everything that you can do. So I push myself a lot where I'm actually still working on it because sometimes it's unhealthy. I push myself too much, but it's just, I know what I'm capable of. And sorry, it took cancer for me to like believe that in myself. And I hope that's not the case for other people. Like, I don't want people to like realize their capabilities just from a cancer diagnosis. Right. But hopefully they can hear, my learnings and take it with them without a cancer diagnosis. But it was just, I'm like maybe third time's the charm, right? And I have been no evidence of disease for 9 years. And do I think about cancer every day? Yes, I do. Do I let it haunt me? No, I don't. There are times where some scans can be harder than others for, some reason. And I just sit with it and I handle it as it comes. And I know, especially now with my involvement so heavily in the community, I know that I have options, and that is the biggest source of hope that I can gain is knowing that there will be options for me to treat it if it ever comes back. But I just hope it never does. So,
And then what's life now like? Because you talked about how, before you were Julie maybe 1.0. Are you like Julie 2.0 now?
I guess there are some things that it's survivorship is very unique because you're honoring who you are with this like new outlook on life, like completely new. So I feel like a completely different person in a lot of ways. But there are also times where I think like back about who I was before and how much I kind of miss her, but she's still in here. It's hard to explain. And I don't know if it's because I miss her because things were easier and she didn't have to endure so much, because I am the way I am now because I've been through so much. And I've experienced so much in life, which has made me stronger in a lot of ways. But it is just, I think back and like, I used to be so goofy and I didn't take like anything seriously. And like I made like so many things a joke, and I'm not so much like that. I still am silly, but I'm a lot more sensitive and emotional and deep, and it still feels new to me. But like I said, it feels like that feels most like myself. So I feel like cancer and the vulnerability that I've experienced in this journey has allowed me to be my true self.
And then physically for you, yeah, I mean, you must be different after going through so many rounds of treatment. Like, they must
It
have had
is.
some physical chronic toll.
It is, and I forget that sometimes, and I try to forgive myself because I do forget, but it affects my day to day, but not to the point where I am unable to do. Well, I mean, it's just things are harder, things are different, but things are still great. For instance, like I had like lymph nodes obliterated, and like with my vein and my nerve, so like I have nerve damage in my chest, so I have really like not a lot of feeling there. It's sensitive to touch. I have these scars, and it feels weird up here. So I feel very fragile with this area. I have lymphedema in my left arm, which swells up and can be painful. I have really little to no, not a lot of lung capacity just because my left diaphragm is paralyzed. And so there's just no oxygen on like the what's left of the left lung is useless. And then I have, a little bit missing from my right lung. So I don't even have like one full functioning lung. It's just like pieces just taken out, and we're just making
So
the
your
best of
left
it.
diaphragm's paralyzed and your part of your right lung is gone. So they kind of equal each other out a little bit. So your lung capacity is pretty low.
It's pretty low, which is, I would say, is a main factor, and it's bittersweet in a lot of ways because I'll probably get like emotional, but like, it's harder to like, I can't talk for long periods of time. So like I can't have like super long conversations without like taking significant breaks. I can't walk and talk. I have a hard time doing incline, and just like I have my little miracle boy now, and it's very hard to hold him for long periods of time, which has like been a heartbreaking thing. But it's also I get emotional because it's like I also didn't think I'd ever be able to have him because I didn't freeze my eggs, and he's like a true miracle in my life, and like the universe gave me him. So it's like it's not like a sad thing. It's just something that like when I feel that, and when I feel like I have to like put him down, I'll try to hold on to him longer because I know how like blessed I am to have this moment even exist in my life, because 10, 12 years ago I was just only given 3 months to live myself. And from then to now, I'm alive, I'm well, I'm giving back to the community, and I get to raise this beautiful little miracle boy. And it's such a full circle moment. I can't even express the amount of gratitude I feel. And it's so, although it's like sad, I can't hold him for as long. I get to hold him. Like I try to think of it and like, I get to hold my son that I didn't think I'd have. So although it's sad that like there are some things that are affected, I still have all of these beautiful things in my life. And I will always be grateful for that. And it's every day I wake up and it's so hard to believe that I have the things that I have, that I've been here for as long as I have. Because if you understand sarcoma, if you understand synovial sarcoma, you know how aggressive this disease is. And most people don't get the outcome that I got. And there's, of course, you've heard of probably survivor's guilt. And there's definitely a lot of that because I've lost so many friends to this disease and it doesn't seem fair. But what I can do is try my best to make an impact in this community and do what I can for the people that are in this now, have yet to be diagnosed, and just move research and treatment and advocacy and awareness forward for them in honor of those people that I lost.
What's very interesting about your story specifically is that, you had stage 4 synovial sarcoma. You thought you were going to lose your life, but instead you actually ended up giving another life, which I think is really interesting because that whole process, and then see now you're raising him. I mean, that's a whole nother journey.
No, I know, and that's what I think about. It's it's such a surreal moment because, and I think back to like the hard decisions I had to make, because at 23 years old, I mean, for me at that time in my life, I was not thinking of having kids at that time. Right. And so to be dealt with such a big life decision that I have to make when a time I'm not ready for it, and it's going to impact the rest of my life, that's like, and everything's happening so quickly where I didn't even have time to like sit with that decision. I was just like, no, I can't freeze my eggs right now. And I don't know what life is going to look like. Like I couldn't even think into the future because the future wasn't promised at all. I had to just take it day by day. And in that moment, I was like, I cannot freeze my eggs. I cannot delay treatment. And so, like you said, to be able to have given life. And I think about that, and I think about everyone that's helped me in my journey, because when I share with the community, what I share about my story, and, everyone's like, "Oh," nurses reach out and they were like, "We love you. We hope you're doing well. Like, you did such a great job." And they say these things and they wish me well. And I hear it and I'm like, do you have any idea like what impact you've made on my life? Like, I feel like I can never give enough credit to my nurses, to the community, to my doctors. Like they didn't just save a life. They brought one in. And yeah, I birthed the child, but like I wouldn't have been able to do that if they didn't work so hard to save my life, right? Like, and it's like such a beautiful thing. It's like teamwork truly made the dream work. I owe so much to every single nurse I ever had, everyone that pushed pathology reports forward, people that moved the needle, people that got me in to see this, this specialist on time. Like everything happened in such divine timing. And here I am sharing my story with you, 9 years NED, with a little 3-year-old love bug who kicked me in the face. And that's why I have a bruise right here. So we were playing and I feel it and I heard my cheek crack. And I'm like, you know what? I'm so blessed to get kicked in the face on accident by my toddler, because I never thought that I would even be able to have any of this. And
So
I
for
try to
people,
remind sorry, go ahead.
no, it's okay. I just wanted to ask, like, for people who are just getting diagnosed, or maybe people who are going through treatment as well,
Mhm.
do you have any like tangible advice, like something that people can actually go, okay, I can implement that today? Whether it's like how to think about it, what to bring with you to the hospital, like things like
Yeah.
logistic things, because I'm sure there's a lot of things that healthcare workers don't think about. And it's like as a patient, you're like, oh well, you wouldn't believe it gets pretty cold in there. You might, and I just those little things I think help. So anyways, anything you can think of.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, um, I would say, I mean, mentally, don't lose hope. I mean, that's the number one piece of advice I always give is don't lose hope. And people might be, okay, don't lose hope. Like, easy to say. How do we do that? How do we not lose hope? Right. And what was a significant impact for me during my treatment and my entire journey was having at least one person to talk to, and that gets it, that like lived through a similar diagnosis. And it's great that the resources we have now online are so readily available, where people are just sharing their stories. And I love that. I love that for the community, because that wasn't available to me. But I did have a friend that I was able to text who had a different cancer. She had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but stage 4, like died on her hospital bed and came back to life. Now she's a mother of 2 boys, right? And it's incredible to have someone. It's so helpful to have someone to talk to when it's 2 a.m. and you're awaiting your scan results and you're going crazy and you need to tell someone all of the really deep, dark thoughts that you can't tell your family. Because you can have a huge support system. You can have a loving husband, partner, friends, close with family. You can have all of those things, but it's different sharing the really dark things with them, because you're also trying to be strong for those people. And that's why, like, I think it was such an impactful moment when I shared with my mom, like, I want to die. And like, I'm like, I should not be saying this to her. I mean, I did, but it just helped to have someone know what it felt like to want to say that, right? Like I said that to my mom and that probably terrified her. But if like I said that to my friend and she's like, I understand, like you're not wrong for feeling that way, and it was very validating to have. It was like a mentor. So if you have at least one person to talk to, I would always recommend that. And again, it's so easy to reach out to people in the community. And, if people are in the community now, that's what it is. People reach out to me all the time. I have a friend with synovial sarcoma. Can you refer? We just like share resources and we connect with one another. And it's like a powerful community now. And another thing that I would share is during chemo, I think people they have it down from what I see in the community. People are pretty good with like preparing, but it's really hard to prepare for chemo because everyone experiences side effects differently. Like, I mean, I would bring a pillow and a blanket and snacks, but I didn't want to eat a lot of certain foods. I also couldn't eat a lot of foods because it wasn't with like the mouth sores and things like that. So not too much on what to bring. I would just stay occupied. And when you feel good, just try to do what you can, like going outside and getting fresh air and just any kind of movement that's available to you when you feel up to it. Again, I so very rarely felt up to it. So it is very different depending on, people's experiences. And another bit of advice that I actually regret not doing, but I was also so sick where I feel like I just couldn't. I just feel like I wasn't in existence when I was in chemo. Like I already felt dead. But I would say if I could go back, I would look into alternative treatments for my side effects, maybe like more holistic routes to help with the side effects, just because again with the mouth sores I was experiencing, I wasn't able to take my pills. I was on a significant amount of pain medication, um nausea, vomiting, and if you can just do your research and just try to find ways to heal your body as it's receiving these toxins, cuz like stage 4 synovial sarcoma, I need chemo. I need chemo, right? I needed chemo. But I wish I could have just like maybe looked further into how to help treat the side effects because they were bad and the pain medicine wasn't even really helping. I feel like my body just got so used to everything that I was on where nothing was helping. So that would just be something that I would have someone look into if it's available to them. And just also, I know it's scary. I know it's scary. Any cancer diagnosis is scary, but as someone continues to learn, a sarcoma diagnosis is very scary. And a synovial sarcoma diagnosis is very, very scary. It's a rare cancer. So there's not as many resources. There's not as many research. You have to really dig. And it's also because it's so rare, the funding comes from directly from the community. So if we want to move the needle here with research and treatments and creating better outcomes for the patients, it really is up to the community. It's up to us. And I know it's really scary to talk about. And when I was actively sick, I didn't really advocate much. I would share my story a little bit from what was available online, but it wasn't as, the resources were different back then. But, after I was NED, I kind of laid low in the community for a while until I just felt this pull, like the community was like begging me to return and share what I needed to share. And it's really important to stay active and advocate. And I know that can be really hard. And I understand what it feels like to not want to be a part of it. Again, with the many friends that I've lost, the many people that I've tried to help, and just so many people in this community fighting for their lives, like they're in the same position that I was or similar positions. And I remember what it was like. And I feel like it's my duty. Like I'm here. Like it's crazy that I'm here. Like why me? So I feel like my purpose is to just continue to advocate for people. So if it's available to someone to use their voice in this community, especially the rare cancer community that sarcoma is, to please do so, because we need people to know about this. And it's up to this little rare community to fund our future, pretty much.
Well, thank you. I thank you so much for sharing your story. I think
Thanks.
I know it's not easy. Some people are okay sharing it, some other people aren't, and I think sharing it's going to help a lot of people down the road now or in the future so that they kind of know what to do, especially when it's a rare cancer and people aren't really talking about it that much. Talking about it
Hmm.
more, but it's not
Right.
as much. So,
Right.
thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
you're
And thank you
welcome.
for wanting to hear and allowing me the space to share.